Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Illuminated Conversation. Appreciate your patience as we're getting started here. We're trying some new tech integrations, and with all things, much like connection, sometimes those can get disrupted. But we're excited to have you here and join today as we really focus on connections in the workplace, why they're important, how they've changed over the last couple of years. And we'll be really sharing ways in which we can identify what we need from our connections, why they're important to not only our sense of well-being, but can really be a buffer against workplace stress. We here at the Lumen Group are really passionate about supporting individuals, teams, in organizations, really helping to foster environments that promote resilience, engagement, and ultimately satisfaction and productivity. We do that through our workshops, retreats, leadership academies, and our coaching. And as part of the workshops, we've been really getting some energy around is stress and strategy. So helping individuals and teams understand how workplace stress can hinder the things that we're talking about and how we can really shift and change that in more helpful ways. So today I am joined by Dr. Megan Broger, our founder and president. We have Donnie Hobbs joining us as well, senior consultant on the Lumen team. And then I am Dr. Emily Hedberg, also a senior consultant, and will serve as today's Illuminated Conversation facilitator. Also wanting to recognize Danielle Simmons, our administrative and operations manager, who helps us with a lot of the behind the scene things to make our work happen day to day. So as part of our model and what sets the Lumen Group apart from other organizations that do similar work is our centered leadership model. This belief that being regulated from a nervous system standpoint can really serve to help us better connect, communicate, and contribute to a positive workplace climate. And this idea of centering is really about grounding, figuring out within ourselves individually, knowing we all have different nervous systems and what helps us to regulate, feel calm, be centered is going to be different for each one of us. But we know that when we do come up from a place of being more centered, or what we call in range, that allows us to access our skills, our abilities, and to really engage with others in a more impactful and meaningful or intentional way. And when things happen like tech challenges, traffic, things that might pull us off center and how we're navigating our day, that can pose challenges in how we show up and impact the people around us. So as part of our programming, and certainly every Illuminated Conversation, we don't just talk and share information, research, or details, but want to offer you an invitation to experience some of the activities that we integrate in the course of our workshops, but also practices that you can take with you each day. And so today, in the theme of connection, I'm going to share and invite you to participate in a 30-second connection practice. So let's take a moment to engage in this brief yet really powerful exercise around this idea of connection. I'll invite you to go ahead and close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so, or simply soften your gaze. Take a moment to take a deep breath in and a slow breath out. Get a nice deep breath in and a slow breath out. Now, I want you to bring to mind someone in your workplace. Could be a colleague, a mentor, maybe your leader, or even someone you haven't spoken to in a while. And as you visualize this person, think of one positive quality, a strength that they bring to your work environment. Could be things like their reliability, you can always count on them, their creativity, they're full of ideas, or maybe even their kindness or presence itself. But think about that one positive quality they bring that contributes to a positive work environment. And I want you to allow yourself to feel a sense of appreciation for this person, how they bring that strength or quality to the work and the impact that has. And perhaps even imagine what it would be like to express this appreciation to them, how it might strengthen your connection or relationship. And I want you to hold on to that feeling for just a few more seconds. Now take one more deep breath in and release it slowly. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes, carrying with you that sense of connection and gratitude for the person you brought into mind. And this could also be an invitation if that person did come to mind and maybe you noticed some positive sentiments as you were thinking about them, perhaps sharing a way in which they positively impact not only you, but the workplace itself. I also find that this can be a really helpful activity if I'm going into a conversation with someone who maybe I have a little bit of maybe tension with, or we've maybe had some exchanges that aren't always positive, to think about and frame that from a perspective of what's a strength that they might bring to this conversation? What's a way that this could actually strengthen the connection that we have with one another? And I think for me, going in with that mindset can often shape how I'm seeing and really experiencing the conversation itself. I'm going to encourage, if you're in the audience, drop in the chat what you noticed, what came up, anything that you would like to share. And will be important as we go through today's conversation, as we're sharing ideas or topics. If you have similar experiences, ideas, or observations you'd like to share, please drop those in the chat for all of us to benefit from. So we selected this topic because we spend so much time at work and those that we work with. And for some of us, and maybe in certain seasons of the work that we do, it could even be more than the time we spend with family and friends. And we've been consistently hearing that social connection in the workplace has weakened or it's changed over the past 5 years. And that's had an impact. So we really want to talk about how we can identify how we feel connected, what factors help us to strengthen those connections, what might hinder that, and some of the impacts of both. So Donnie, I'm going to start with you and just opening it up for you to share some observations you've had on how workplace social connections have changed the last few years, what you're seeing and hearing as you support clients and others.
Yeah, that's a great question. And before I get into my answer, I just want to say thank you for providing that space for us to, in my mind, it was, I've been moving through the day at a pretty fast clip, and it was a chance just to pull over and kind of fill up my tank with appreciation and gratitude. And when we get busy and forget, that's even available, that was just, it was really nice just to completely shift my state as we step into this. So thank you for that.
That's great feedback.
Yeah. But yeah, connection has changed a lot over the past. We'll use the marker of the pandemic, starting as a starting point here. One of the things that I noticed with my clients was that when we initially all went remote because we didn't know the impact that COVID was going to have, there was kind of a spike in connection. Right? Everybody was remote, but they're checking in with each other. How you doing? Are you healthy? What's it like working from home? And then after it became a little bit more apparent that, this wasn't going to be just a flash in the pan, and it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, we started having some really interesting conversations around this idea of connection. And it really started to become apparent that some people were really struggling with not being or feeling connected to folks at work because they were working remotely. Other people were kind of thriving. They were finding different ways to connect that still felt fulfilling. And so this idea that everybody, going back to some of our earlier conversations, everybody has a different recipe for how it feels to be centered. And I think people have a kind of a different idea of or feel around uh, what it's like to be connected with
Yeah.
coworkers. And so I think that's a really important component here, but it's so complex because everybody has a different level of need. And one of the things that we've found is that people kind of get into this back and forth battle of this trade-off of
Mm,
being connected or feeling connected with people at work versus the sense of autonomy or a little bit more flexibility in their schedule. And both are really important to us as humans. And
yeah.
so it's kind of this back and forth. And so that's one of the things that I've noticed that comes up a lot in conversation, in coaching conversations, and in some of uh, my work there.
Yeah, it's this tension and trade-off between competing needs,
Hmm.
but knowing that really the social need is just as vital as some of those other things. So it's that tension between, do I have that sense of connection and togetherness, but what might be the drawbacks in terms of maybe flexibility and autonomy in the work itself?
Right.
And even as we hear about this idea of, this pandemic of loneliness, and even, Megan, right, this idea of, do I really need friends in the workplace? But why is that important, to have social connection?
Yeah, this is I think a really important question because on the face of it, we can hear social connection in the workplace and we might interpret that as looking to build friendships or looking to have somebody to have lunch with or things like that. And of course, those are part of our social experiences in the workplace, but it really goes much beyond that. And one of the things that we do at the Lumen Group is try to ground our engagements and our approaches in science. And so we are looking to stay really current on the knowledge and the research that's available. And one thing that's been really interesting that we have aligned with is some work being done out of Harvard and MIT. There's a joint initiative called the Work and Wellbeing Initiative, where they're looking at some certain work design principles to help foster well-being and health in the workplace. And stress and levels of stress and mitigating stress are factors as part of that overall understanding of health and well-being. And what their research shares is that our social relationships and the neural networks that they create in our brains have a really critical impact on our health, on our well-being, on longevity, even as we move over the course of our lives. And also that people who have stronger relationships can weather stressful interactions and stressful phases better than people
Mm,
who are less connected. They have that those stronger social connections tend to correlate with stronger or more kind of sophisticated emotional resources. So a sense of resilience is often seen as something that's stronger in people who are more socially connected. And if we think about that just in terms of our experiences with colleagues, those that we feel comfortable with, that we feel like we know that we can trust beyond just a role that somebody's playing, we're probably much more likely to reach out and ask for help
mm,
or, get a second set of eyes on something or run something by somebody before we make an important next step or take that decision. And so if we take away those resources, you can just imagine the impact on levels of stress that really have nothing to do with the work itself. It's about how we're interacting with people as we're doing our work. And so, in short, weakened social connections can lead to increased levels of stress and
mm.
reductions in productivity and quality.
Hmm.
Yeah, the other thing that came up as you were sharing, Megan, is this idea of even those social skills.
Yeah.
And maybe in the absence of opportunity to practice those, our skill set has weakened a bit or atrophied. Wondering if you or Donnie could speak a little bit to that, how that maybe plays a role in our experience of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Megan, what are your thoughts?
You know, what came to mind now, and also when you were kind of sharing about the tension that people can feel between autonomy and connection and the various ways that we can do work now and where we do work. It reminded me of, I think this was maybe at the end of 2020, early 2021, the World Health Organization made a change in the language they were using from encouraging people to be socially distanced to be physically distanced,
Mm,
because they recognized that those were two distinctly different human experiences. And so I think a lot of people, when they heard socially distant, what they heard was disconnect, whereas physically distanced means connect in a different way.
Mhm.
But
yeah.
what would you say, Donnie?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think one of the things that seemed to come up a lot was that, social skills are, like Emily said, they're like a muscle. If you don't go to the gym for a year and then you go back in, you can't be expected to jump right back in where you left off.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had numerous conversations with people who have gone back to work after being out for months and months. And it's an entirely different experience. You're face to face. You can see, more nonverbal cues and pick up on so much more in the communication, the back and forth communication. And they, a lot of people kind of laughed at it and said, yeah, I'm kind of fumbly socially, and but I'm going to get back into the swing of things. But for those of us who are a little bit more sensitive to how we show up, or maybe self-critical or carry a little social
Mm,
anxiety, that's a really big deal to
Mm-hmm.
go in, and that can be a really painful experience to step into that setting and not feel the same familiarity or comfort level that they may have before. And so another variable that plays into this idea that, you know, connection, yes, it's important, but all of a sudden it's more painful than it's been.
mm,
And is that worth, is it worth that sense of connection? Or do I
Mm-hmm.
disconnect a little further?
yeah, we were also talking earlier about Gen Z in the workforce, who for many of them came in at a time where it was all purely virtual. And to not have that example of prior to that experience to say, oh, I was actually really socially skilled, or I was really effective in meetings, or people thought I was really funny, or it was easy to connect. In the absence of that benchmark,
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be even more challenging, or maybe that tendency to maybe be more critical in that evaluation
Mhm.
of oneself, or purely just not having some of those experiences to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about this idea of social connection being universal. We all have a need for it. But Donnie, you made a point earlier about each individual is going to vary in terms of what that needs to look like or be like for them. Um, so, how does one determine their level of need or that desire?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. And since it is so subjective, it can be helpful to kind of turn the attention toward toward ourselves a little bit and use the wisdom of the body to start to realize, what am I noticing here in the way of sensations or emotions? Am I feeling isolated? Am I feeling overstimulated? And trying to just create a little bit of a baseline or a sense of like, what do I really need? What am I craving here with everything else that we've been talking about in mind? knowing that we have a tendency to move away from uncomfortable situations, and avoidance is easy at a distance. So looking at, what's going on for me? Am I noticing low motivation? Am I really restless? Is it hard for me to sit still or focus on my meetings? All of these could be signals that we need maybe a little bit more connection or a little less connection. I think one thing that is interesting that can get in the way is this idea of our inherent resilience. We can adapt really quickly to really challenging situations, like most or many of us did at the beginning of the pandemic. And while we adapt, that doesn't mean that the need goes away, the need for other things. So we move into kind of a survival space where we're just getting by, and we can put our some of our personal, even our survival needs aside, as long as we're still moving forward. And so going back to this idea that we've talked about before, is just pulling over and starting to notice, what do I need? Take that inventory to see, do I notice gaps here in my sense of connection with other people? And if so, what can I or might I do about that? But I think, yeah, just tuning into the wisdom of the body to start to listen to, what's my baseline here for need for connection.
So what's striking me about that is, that power of understanding it for ourselves. I'm curious, Megan, if I start to find that my needs and desires contrast with maybe some of my colleagues or my leader, how might people approach that in the workplace?
The need for social connection, whether it's quantity or time of day, any number of variables can shift, but it is a form of diversity. So some people might be perfectly happy saying good morning as they walk into the office and then saying good night when they leave, and that's a great day. And so that's part of, I think, some of the discomfort and the tension that Donnie was describing earlier, is that when I'm working at home and it's just kind of me, like I'm the only one I need to factor in. Like, do I need something? Well, I'll go get that. When we step back into the workplace, now we're putting ourselves back into a social system. So it's no longer just about us. It's about how are we kind of creating some sort of shared understanding and balance with others. And so I think that's the piece where we can, remind ourselves both how important it is to recognize what we need, and to remember that what we need might be different than what someone else needs. And to try to not feel uncomfortable about that, but rather get curious about that. So that's an opportunity to engage in a connection, in a conversation with somebody. Hey, in your ideal world, how many meetings would you have a day? How long would they be? Do you prefer to be IM'd even if we're, 5 cubes apart? Or are you okay with me popping over if I have a question? Being able to just speak kind of plainly around people's needs, wishes for social connection when they're in the workplace is really important. And for people, like Donnie said, to take stock of the wisdom of the body and what we notice. Are we feeling overwhelmed? Are we feeling frustrated? Are we feeling isolated? Those are cues, maybe to some of our own needs. And for people who appreciate having a little bit kind of structure around some reflection, the U.S. Surgeon General's office released kind of three areas of three components of social connection. And one of them is structure. So how many and what kinds of connections do I have at work? Are they all within kind of my group, or do I have some connections with other teams? Function. Do I just connect with people when I'm working on this part of my job, or do I get some connection with just like informal social interactions, but then, project work as well? So structure, function, and then the last one is quality. So how do I feel as I'm experiencing those things? Is it respectful? Do I feel like there's, it's a trusting and trustworthy or a psychologically safe environment or interaction? Do I feel like I get what I need? Do I believe that they get what they need? So if we think about structure, function, and quality, that can also help us assess where might I be at? Where might I have strength, and where might I have opportunity to kind of really strengthen my social connection? Again, as we think about this through the lens of helping us to better mitigate and manage stress in the workplace.
And I think that power of, as you were describing, how we can be more inclusive of one another. So people really feel like I am heard and valued, and my needs are being tended to in the work that I'm doing. But I really like that framework that you presented: structure, function, quality as really a benchmark. But then that also gets us into so what do we do with that next? And I know we're close to time here, so really wanting to invite folks to join us for our next Illuminated conversation, which will be on August 22nd. You can scan the QR code on the bottom left of the screen, where we're going to talk about, so once we have identified those needs, maybe honoring some of the tension or differences within the workplace, what are the ways that we can go about connecting with people in different ways, or having some of those conversations to really alleviate some of that stress and just foster that sense of well-being and resilience, not only for ourselves, but amongst our teammates as well. So as always, thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, Donnie and Megan, for your perspectives here today. And we'll see you again in a few weeks.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks all.
Take care, everyone.